Bryson DeChambeau trying to defend his championship this week at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, and he is the heavy favorite for betting for this weekend at Detroit Golf Club. We're going to break things down from a DFS perspective, let you know our thoughts on Bryson, whether he can repeat, what we're doing from a roster construction perspective, and our favorite golfers in each salary tier for this week. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, have you physically recovered from watching the playoff on Sunday?
Not quite. And I actually, I thought you were going to ask me about all the golf I played this weekend, because I played 3 rounds between Thursday and Sunday. So almost like a pro, but I got to skip Saturday. But I was thrashed by the end of it. So I don't know how these guys do this like week in, week out. I usually do a fair amount of walking when I play, but with all that golf, by like Sunday evening, I was just done with golf.
But it's not even like the walking; it's like the mental engagement. Like yeah. I was walking this morning, and the idea of like not having to think for my job for like a day or two, like it made me very happy. But like that's because like there's always like this mental load on you, and I don't do a very high leverage job. I do a very stupid job. I can't imagine being involved in an 8-hole playoff, playing the same holes over and over and over again, trying to win some cash, and just being like, okay, I'm bouncing back next week. Like Kramer Hickok is in the field this week, so that's just exhausting to me. Again, as someone who has a very low leverage job, having to go through that and then just bounce back like, yeah, Thursday, let's do it again. Why not?
Yeah, and all the things that they think about that I wish I could think about with like wind and how the lie's really affecting you. I mean, I try to factor all that in.
Wind does not matter for my golf shots. I can guarantee you that's it. That thing's gonna go where it's gonna go.
Yeah, but I don't know. For me, like I try to hit cups so long as I'm not holding people up. But standing over like a 4-footer, which I think a lot of people just pick up and say it's good. Like you do that like 54 holes in 4 days. I was like, I'm over this by the end of Sunday. So even more credit to the pros.
Yeah, a lot of squats to get down, check it out. So get a little swole. Why not? Just have some fun. We're going to have some fun this week getting you set for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. That is at Detroit Golf Club. We're going to break that down in just 1 second. But first, as always, a reminder that it is not just the Heat Check for PGA nowadays here on the FanDuel family of networks. I don't know the right way to phrase this. Either way, we're back here once again, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Brandon is taking your questions live on air, 3:30 to 4 p.m., breaking down the Rocket Mortgage Classic, both for betting and for DFS. I'll swing by at 4 p.m. to talk MLB DFS, and Aaron Dolan is swinging by at 4:30 to talk NBA betting. So a full hour and a half long show for today, taking your questions, 3 hosts, 3 subjects. A lot of fun. That is today, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Make sure you are subscribed there. Also, make sure you check out the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, where the audio version of this podcast goes. We also have MLB DFS podcasts every weekday. No UFC this week because they are off for the holiday, but back again next week with Austin Swaim. And then NASCAR is coming your way on Friday for this weekend's race at Road America, their first race there. Let's get in to the Rocket Mortgage Classic for this week. Again, it's at Detroit Golf Club, the North Course. It is 7,370 yards and a par 72. There are 156 golfers in the field. The traditional cut rules apply. It is just the 3rd time they have played this course on the PGA Tour. The winners of those 2 years have been 23 and 25 under respectively. So a lot of birdies. Definitely going to be in play here for this week. Brandon, what can we glean from looking at the data from those first 2 events?
Like kind of not a whole lot in terms of we can learn some, like what we can really learn is that not a single stat really jumps out. And I think that's kind of key, but probably the overall takeaway, and this is never fun to hear, but the real angle is birdies. And whenever whenever birdies come into play and scores, you got to flirt with 20 under, 25 under perhaps to win. I know that you mentioned the two winning scores being 23, 25 under, but the runner-ups were 19 and 20 under as well. So, I mean, not quite, you don't have to be 24 under, but you have to be close to 20 under to really push for that win. So whenever you have an easy course, volatility gets ramped up just because more guys can make birdies than can like kind of avoid bogeys on difficult holes. We talk about it, every time we get a week like this. So you just get more golfers who can contend, and that increases volatility naturally. And I think that whenever we have something like that, you can just sort of boil down all the stats to how do you make a birdie, and it's with good ball striking. So driver, irons, and then a really good putter. Wedges aren't really going to come into play so much, and if they do, you're probably not scoring well enough to be completely relevant over 4 rounds. That's not to say though you don't even need to bring your wedges, or we should actively be targeting golfers who are bad around the green. It's just more that's not really what's going to get you to a 20 under score unless you're holing out numerous times from green side. So you could look at birdie conversion, possibly opportunities gained, which is a good fantasy national stat, which is basically birdie opportunities. But I'm just really not seeing a whole lot that's bankable in terms of distance versus accuracy. So for me, it's just going to come down to elite putting, which is not easy to predict, but we also know that putting is not completely random, even if sometimes it feels like it is. It's not. Better baseline putters have a higher chance of having good putting performances. So for me, the key stats are just strokes gained approach, strokes gained putting on bent and POA greens. That's what we get this week. Strokes gained off the tee, and then birdie or better rate.
Yeah, I had the same conclusion with regards to off the tee play, because you look at Data Golf's numbers and it shows that a larger percentage of the scoring is explained by accuracy than usual. But then you look at Bryson DeChambeau and Matthew Wolff being the top 2 guys last year, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to make accuracy be a key stat for me. So I went off the tee as well. So I think that what I would say the takeaway for me is from driving is that you don't need to be a bomber to compete. And that kind of goes back to what you were talking about, where there is a larger pool of golfers who can realistically go low here. And that's impactful both in terms of like volatility and roster construction, because you may want to go more balanced, but also it means like Webb Simpson is more in play than usual to me. Stuff like that. Guys who may not be super long off the tee, but are good off the tee and can get birdies despite their lack of length. I think that's kind of the big takeaway from my perspective. Are you kind of getting a similar vibe in that regard?
Yeah, so it's kind of a week where some like extra golfers are kind of in the mix. Specifically, the shorter hitters who can make birdies, which is not like the hugest overlap, but those guys are going to be in play. So like someone like Webb Simpson, super appealing to me because he makes a lot of birdies despite not being long. But I think I just have an added emphasis in my spreadsheet on putting, because that's how you can hit as many greens in regulation as the next guy, but I should probably say like gain as many strokes with approach. But either way, you can have as many birdie chances, but it comes down to putting conversion. And Data Golf actually has a tool that shows what drives the variation in scoring. For Detroit over 2 years, it's been almost 44% of the scoring. So explained by putting is how these guys separate. So basically what you think of is, put everyone on the green in the same spot. It's more about who makes those putts, which is kind of obvious. It's already about 36% on average, but it's even ramped up because the course is so easy. So guys can get into birdie chance. It's just who makes the putts. So that's why putting is like elevated for me. So yeah, I mean, just you got to make birdies, and if you struggle to make birdies on other courses, I'm not really that interested in you for this week.
So we're going to emphasize putting, which naturally means we'll talk about Hideki Matsuyama in past history in just 1 second. But first, basketball fans, the NBA Conference Finals are in full swing, and FanDuel is offering a special new user bonus. Place a bet on any single team's money line, and you will receive exclusive 30-1 odds for that wager. All you have to do is head over to FanDuel Sportsbook, create an account, and take advantage of this amazing NBA playoff odds boost. Maximum bet $5, must be 21 plus and present in Colorado, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. New users only. $10 first deposit required, max bonus 150. Restrictions apply. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Colorado, call 1-800-522-4700. In Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. For confidential help in Michigan, call 1-800-270-7117. In Tennessee, call the Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Let's talk about Hideki as we transition into past history here at Detroit Golf Club. Of course, not a lot of history to go with, just 2 years here so far, but Hideki has been here both years. And Brandon, top 25 finishes in both. What did you see in those top 25 finishes with regards to Hideki for this week?
Yeah, so Hideki's finished 21st last year, 13th in 2019, and he's put up really good ball striking stats in both of those starts, which is exactly what you'd expect from Hideki Matsuyama. Good driver play, but even better approach play for him. And that's really kind of what we need to see from him to like the course form, because the current form is strong. After winning the Masters, he was 39th at the Byron Nelson, 23rd at the PGA Championship, 62nd at the Memorial, 26th at the US Open. If you look at the stats, he is the best tee to green golfer in my database, which adjusts for recency and also field strength. So pretty nice there. 83rd percentile and birdie or better rate gained as well, which is really what it comes down to for, Detroit. But even though Hideki's not a great putter, he still makes birdies. And so it's a little bit tricky because I am emphasizing birdies and I'm emphasizing putting. So he fits one of those. But one thing to keep in mind is that Hideki is a lot worse on Bermuda greens with his putter. He's actually slightly positive on POA. He's only barely negative on bent grass. So we get that combination this week. So I think Hideki makes a lot of sense. Any thoughts on Hideki for you?
I mean, he's great, and I think he makes a lot of sense. The problem is I have other guys above him in that salary tier, and I have to be selective at some point. I prefer Bryson. We'll talk about in 2 seconds. I prefer Patrick Reed over Hideki. That might be stupid. I like him more though. I like Webb over both those guys. So to me, if I'm ranking, go ahead.
I actually have Patrick Reed as, and this will be a little bit strange, but I do something where I combine their long-term adjusted strokes gained data, and then I weight their recent stats and just come up with who's in the best long-term form and who kind of has the best stats, and Patrick Reed's number one, surprisingly, for this week.
So I'm not stupid to rank Patrick Reed higher. Okay, good to know. I would say if I'm ranking those top 4 guys, so Bryson, Reed, Hideki, and Webb, I feel like Hideki's probably 4th, which means through no fault of his own, because Hideki's great, I will probably not wind up using him for this week. Am I underrating him, or do you think that is appropriate given how good those other 3 guys are?
I think it's appropriate, and you can't play all of them unless what you do, and this is not really what you're asking me, but I think ultimately how I'm going to land with lineup construction is pick 3 to 4 of the studs and then rotate in all the values, because we'll see value plays perform really well at a course like this, but who they are is going to be harder to predict. And yes, that's not to say that the studs will be, can't miss options, but I'm trying to narrow down the studs for this week so that I can build around a pool of value plays. And I think just kind of by default, Hideki's not going to quite make that. So I think I'd probably rank him 4th out of the top 4 as well.
Okay. Yeah. So again, it's not like Hideki, we're not in on him. It's more so those guys are really good. And it's not the deepest field, but those 4 guys specifically, I think are tremendous.
Yeah. And then right behind them, it's Zalatoris, Jason Kokrak, Neiman. I like Neiman a lot this week.
Yeah.
Matthew Wolf. And then you get to Lesson Day. That's not as appealing.
No, it's not. So let's talk about Bryson and why we have him above Hideki. It's not just because he won last year, but hey, it doesn't hurt. He is the big favorite this week. Makes sense given the overall standing, but it's also in part due to what he did last year. That's why he's a favorite. Bryson actually lost strokes in approach. He lost 0.5 across 4 rounds, but he gained 6.7 off the tee, 7.8 on the greens to get the win there. And those parts aren't super fluky. The degree of them may be, you don't expect 7.8 strokes putting, but he ranks first in strokes gained off the tee, 8th in bentgrass plus POA putting over the past 100 rounds. Bryson enters with 5 straight finishes outside the top 15. That's even with the approach play potentially ticking back up, just been largely bit by around the green play, which is abnormal for Bryson. So the win last year was fueled by putting. That's very true. And his form isn't necessarily lights out, but I still feel like he's the best guy in this field. And I'm not sure the salary discrepancy is necessarily big enough for me to say I can just skip over Bryson. I think the best argument for not using him is what you've talked about, where there's more volatility in a field where more guys can make birdies. But straight up, I feel like Bryson is deserving of this top spot. What are your thoughts on him, and what are your thoughts on him from a tournament perspective for this week?
So it's really kind of conflicting me because, yes, Bryson is, based on my database, the best golfer over the past year, but it's not very substantial. Patrick Reed, Webb Simpson are pretty close behind. And in my simulations, like I know the sportsbook odds at FanDuel are heavy on Bryson at 7-1, with Reed at 14, Hideki, Webb at 16. But that would kind of imply that he's twice as likely to win than the next guy. But my win simulations don't really have it that way. It's a lot closer for Reed and Webb Simpson. So I have Bryson around 7.2%, 7%, Reed at 6%, Webb at 5.4. So Bryson is that guy, but it's not so egregiously ahead of everyone else. I still think he's the best process-based play that we have because we know the driver's there and strokes gained off the tee is the most predictive of the 4. You mentioned the putting being amazing here for his win, but it's not abnormal for him to gain 5+ strokes putting. We see it because he's a great putter. So I'm not really going to talk anyone out of playing Bryson in tournaments, especially because we will have so many ways to differentiate this week. I think with even some of the value plays, we can just leave salary on the table. So Bryson's going to be chalky, but with 1 or 2 sort of sub 10% players, you can really build a different lineup anyway. That's not to say I'm playing Bryson in every tournament lineup, but I'm actually more okay with it this week than I would be otherwise, just because of kind of where he stands and because the field drops off after that top 7. So I don't feel quite as bad.
And we often talk about avoiding Bryson due to his imperfections, whether it be with his approach play. The around the green play is an imperfection as well. But I think those imperfections are less of an issue this week than usual because he's not competing with every top stud. He's competing with some good golfers for sure, really good golfers, but it's not as deep of a field as usual, which means his flaws are less of an issue than they would be otherwise.
So I have Bryson about 35% likely to top 10. That's pretty solid. I would assume he's going to have a top 20, top 15 finish. I'm not necessarily in love with him to win outright. So I think that there's still a case to be made for just kind of locking in Bryson for cash games for sure. Yes. But again, not avoiding him in tournaments.
Well, actually, I don't know. For cash games, I might take the savings of the Webb, honestly, because he is $500 less than Bryson and pretty volatile field. I can avoid some rougher golfers in the bottom end. So this may be backwards, but I actually think I am more pro not using Bryson in cash than in tournaments. Is that strange?
It is, because I think that there's not a whole lot of distinction between the low end guys, and there are actually multiple golfers in the 7,000 range I'd be okay with. So I'll go on record and say that I'm going to play Bryson in our head-to-head contest for this week.
I am undecided. So we'll talk about that throughout the podcast for today. But for tournaments, I agree. Bryson, very, very good option, despite the baked-in popularity. Let's talk about Steph Straka. Straka is a lower salaried guy for this week, and Straka has been here both years thus far, both finishes inside the top 15. What do you see with Steph Straka here at $8,900?
Yeah, so we're looking at guys who have done well here, effectively played both years or one like Bryson, but 8th and 11th, which is really strong for any golfer at any salary. And at 8,900, that's really promising. He also gained strokes in all 4 areas in each of those stats. So it's been like a balanced debut at the course, which is hard to find, overall. And Straka is someone who in the past, at least, I've talked about a lot. Haven't really been there for a while because the irons are usually why I've liked him, but they're not particularly good until they showed up last week and he finished 10th at the Travelers. We could find that Straka is a little bit chalkier than you would expect, just because he's one of the few guys with multiple top 15s here, and just really just one of the few guys who's like played here twice and has like something to show for it. So, coming off that 10th place with good iron play, I think that we got to make sure that we're not just locking in Straka and saying he's a sure thing, because he's really not. He is a good birdie maker, 84th percentile there over the past 100 rounds, according to Fantasy National, but I see enough with Straka to like him, but he's just not necessarily a slam dunk play. So did he jump out to you at all?
I get kind of the same perception. Another reason why I'd be okay if he does track to be popular, like you alluded to. Another reason I'd be okay not being there is that I do like some golfers in the mid 8,000 range. I'm not sure if I'll go 7,000, which you are on board with, but Cameron Davis and Doug Gim are my 2 favorite value plays, and they're 87 and 85. And like, I like them more than Straka straight up. And if he's going to be popular, that makes it even easier. So I think that Straka is a consideration, but if he's going to be popular, I'm fine if avoiding him.
Yeah. I mean, for me, Cam Davis, Doug Gim, Tom Hoagie, James Hahn, like, I can get to Bryson a lot easier. So that's kind of that range that I've been talking about with regards to Bryson versus Webb for our top golfer. So,
well, again, just for cash games, for tournaments, Bryson's the top guy. Okay. So to be clear on that, for cash games, I might be okay taking the savings, but we'll see as we go through things for today. Let's talk about Doc Redmond. Similar to Straka, he has been here both years thus far, and he's kind of the anti-Bryson in that time. He's doing everything except for driving the ball well. He has been your 8 total rounds. Redmond has. He has gained an average of 0.1 strokes off the tee per round. That is compared to 0.7 on approach and 1.0 putting. And Redmond turned that into finishes of 2nd and 21st. What's best about the runner-up is that it was before Redmond had like that massive heater after the COVID layoff last year. So basically, his form back then was not as good as it was for last year's event. And, he finished 21st last year. The problem is Redmond is not as hot now as he was coming off the COVID break. He's lacked consistency recently. In fact, he has actually been actively bad off the tee. Even when he finished runner-up in Palmetto, he lost 0.1 off the tee. So I think the form is kind of scary here with Redmond at 10-1. If he were 9,000, I wouldn't care, but he's not. 10-1 is a kind of a high number for a guy who is a little bit erratic, I guess, at times right now. What are you feeling with Doc Redmond at $10,100?
Yeah, so he's a perfect example of just how this field kind of drops off, because at 10,000 in most fields, we're still looking at guys we feel mostly comfortable with. It's not like that's not what we get every week, but there are weeks where it's like this and we start to really get those red flags a little bit earlier. And honestly, I try to write up 5 guys in each sort of general tier for my primer on numberFire. And Redmond made the cut as just someone else, like an other to consider. So I'm not necessarily in love with him, but relative to the salary, I do think he stands out. That doesn't necessarily make him a great play, specifically because he has been losing strokes off the tee so frequently. The one case really to be made for Redmond is that at his peak, we know what he can do, and that's basically just hit the irons really well and putt pretty well. And the around the green play, which is usually a concern, is less of a concern this week. So, that's kind of that. But like the 10, if he was like 96 even, it'd be a little bit different. But
right,
10-1,
he's 200 less than Charlie Hoffman. I have fewer concerns with Charlie Hoffman than Doc Redmond right now. Much rather go Hoffman. That could be me. I think that Cameron Tringali is probably someone I'd rank a decent amount above Redmond as well. He's around
That's
that
an
range.
extra 600. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 600, but like I could just avoid the 10K range, like the low 10 outside of Hoffman. So I think that Tringali is worth that $600 difference. I think that Hoffman is worth the $200 difference, which means that if I'm in this range, I'm just going to reconfigure to get up to them as opposed to settling for Redmond. I think that's where
I'm going to update my article live on the show and go with Hoffman over Redmond.
Oh man, Charlie Hoffman, the Chip Gaines of the PGA Tour. We're working now. Okay, live updates on the air.
Is that a saying?
No, he kind of looks like him though, right?
All right, man. So whenever I come to you with lookalikes, you are very, very particular about details. I don't really see it much at all. I think that one's a stretch.
No, I think it's accurate.
Okay.
Like just let it marinate a bit and we'll get back to me. I think you'll see it eventually. Let's talk about current form and golfers who are golfing well right now. Starting off with a guy we talked about before, we kind of like, which feels weird, but it's Patrick Reed at 11-8. Reed is a good golfer. Brandon, good golfers are sometimes good at golf, and sometimes that can be good for DFS. So what do you see with Patrick Reed here recently at 11-8?
Yeah, I didn't realize we'd have gotten so far into the top 4 yet, but I think
we didn't talk about Reed enough specifically. Go ahead.
I think Reed's really interesting because he's going to be someone you can almost always pivot to. And for what it's worth, because I already pulled this up, the FanShare sports tags, surprisingly, 3 of the top 4 are the golfers we discussed in course history. So Doc Redmond's number 1 with most tags. Bryson, then it's Joaquin Neiman tied with Steph Straka. So like any ways to differentiate, I think, are viable, especially when they're not dumb. And it's definitely not dumb to consider, some lineups where you don't play Bryson and you play Patrick Reed, even though it's a course where you need a lot of birdies. Because Reed's actually surprisingly 98th percentile in birdies made, or birdie or better rate gained over the past 100 rounds. He's like 15th in birdie or better rate for the PGA Tour season alone. So it doesn't really feel that way, but he can make birdies because he's a really good putter. And over the past 20 rounds, according to Data Golf's True Strokes Gained metric, Reed's at a 1.95 per round, which is adjusted for field strength. Next up is Hideki at 1.49. So basically a half stroke better, more or less, than anyone else over the past 20 rounds. The finishes recently include a 17th at the PGA Championship, missed the cut at the Charles Schwab, 5th at Memorial, 19th at US Open, 25th at the Travelers. The irons are really coming alive, which is really surprising to see with Reed. So, it might be a little cute. It's too cute for me in cash games to pivot from Bryson, but I really mean it that we have other ways to go, this week at the top. So Reed's one of them for me.
And I think that the best contest type for Patrick Reed would be single entry, because when you're thinking about single entry mindset, you're thinking about, I can't miss out on Bryson, or I'll pivot off Bryson, I'll go Webb or Hideki. Patrick Reed will go overlooked in that format. And people like to use golfers they like. I'm not sure if there are double-digit people on the planet who would rank Patrick Reed above Hideki Matsuyama from a likability perspective. So he's going to go overlooked. And I think that for single entry specifically, Patrick Reed is a tremendous option for this week.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Single entries, such a great...
Yeah,
it's my favorite way to play DFS, single entry tournaments. But yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not kind of glossing over Reed in terms of, Reed's just good, but Reed's been really, really good lately.
Yeah. I think the birdie making point, you said 98th percentile, that's pertinent because he has
don't think of that.
Flaws. Right, exactly. You don't think of that, but he does that. He's a great bentgrass and POA putter. If we're emphasizing that more this week, he grades out well there. So yeah, I think that Patrick Reed is great. I think that I'm kind of leaning towards what you were saying, where you pick 3 of the studs and make them your core and then differentiate elsewhere for this week. So if I had to rank for tournaments, it's Bryson, Webb, Reed. but I want to make sure I'm heavy enough on that tier in general to still make myself be overweight on Patrick Reed, despite having him ranked third of that group. I think that's where I'm at right now with these guys.
Yeah, Neiman's close for me, but
yeah,
it's probably going to be those four that I just kind of lock into.
Yep. I think that's the way I'd want to play things for this week. Let's talk about Kramer Hickok. We discussed him earlier with the playoff, but he's in the field this week again, as of right now at least, after that long playoff on Sunday. He's $8,700, so, getting some buzz. It's worth digging into Hickok a bit deeper. He was in the playoff despite losing strokes and approach. He gained 4.3 off the tee, 7.5 on the green last week, and that's not to say that Hickok is a bad approach player. He gained 1.7 at the Charles Schwab last month and finished 14th there. Overall, though, Hickok ranks 88th in approach, 43rd off the tee. He is 23rd in birdies or better game, despite being a bad putter. So he can make birdies, which is important. So I don't think that Hickok is a bad play. He does some things well. As he showed, he can go low and he can make pars when necessary as well. But I haven't seen enough with Hickok to think that he's on some sudden upswing to buy into. So to me, I think that, again, if we're talking about golfers in this tier, give me Cam Davis, give me Doug Gim over him. But Brandon, what are your thoughts on Kramer Hickok after that impressive showing last week?
Over under third percentile combined bent grass and POA putting for Hickok over the past 100 rounds.
Oh, I'm guessing it's probably going to be right there.
The second percentile.
Whew.
He's not particularly good.
It's not great, Bob.
He's better on Bermuda for sure. The irons, while he's not abysmal, he's 38th percentile over the past calendar year adjusted for field strength and recency. So I'm going to just not chase that and hope that other people have interest.
Yeah, I think that that's where I'm at too. And again, it comes down to the fact that I have other options. I do want to differentiate more in the value plays than with the studs, just because that's the way that I think that we should play things this week, given the way the studs break out. But even with the differentiation piece being in play, I do still think that Hickok will not be a piece I use to differentiate.
No, he's not going to be there for me. There are too many other good plays right around that range.
So let's move down to the low 8,000 range. Talk about your second current form golfer, old Hank Lebiota, back on the podcast here. $8,200. We have not talked about old Hank in a hot second, Brandon. How's he doing right now?
Yeah, I used to talk about him a little more. Not so much lately, but there are reasons to do so now at 8,200. So he's kind of one of my guys. But past 5 starts include a 13th, 51st, 17th, 31st, and 5th. The 5th coming last week at the Travelers. The putter has been hot, but over the past 20 rounds, he ranks 18th in both Data Golf's true strokes gained tee to green and putting. So it's not just the putter, it's also the tee to green play. That's what you want to look at, not just the finishes, but how's he doing it. It's with tee to green and putting. So that's perfect for 8,200. He's missed the cut both years here, but has gained 2.1 from approach in each. So it's a little more forgivable there, especially with two years of data. Don't just look at who's missed cuts and say that they're not a good fit for the course. Could be putting, could be missing the cut on the number. But is he someone you think you might, because it sounds like we're both having a value core. Is Lebiota someone you'd sprinkle in?
Yeah, why not? I think that it's worth looking at. You were talking about the finishes, but the approach play is really interesting. You talked about the approach play, what he's had at this event, but if we look at his recent events, he gained 1 at the Travelers, lost 3.2 at the Palmetto, but 4.1 at the Byron Nelson, 6.2 at the Wells Fargo, 4.1 at the Honda where he missed the cut. But I think what that shows is he can have pop weeks, and we talk about pop weeks a lot in terms of having upside. I think that Lebiota has that. So yeah, why not? I mean, he finished 5th last week. Sure. I think that there are plenty of reasons to be interested here and using him as a differentiation piece. And we were talking before about Bryson versus Webb. The difference between Cam Davis and Hank Lebiota is $500. I don't think that's an outrageous swap to make, going Bryson and Lebiota over Davis and Webb. I feel better about Davis and Webb. Is that like a law firm or something? I don't know. Anyway, But like, I feel better
that
about that
college?
combo for floor.
No,
Maybe
Gardner Webb.
Gardner Webb. Yeah.
This was a quarterback.
Davis Webb. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. The
That did sound
Giants
familiar.
backup. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I think that Hank is worth consideration as one of those rotation pieces. I'm on board.
Yeah, I mean, I would not quite put it in that 2v2 conversation, but it's more of a, like if I get Lebiota and Sebastian Munoz or something to get back up to whatever else that would be, it'd be more like a 3 versus 3 than a 2v2.
Sure.
But the point remains, like, I think that there are a lot of value plays in the conversation this week. Usually we don't talk about a lot of value plays, which I always feel bad about, but I don't think they're good process plays. This week, it's a lot different.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Lebiota deserves to be in that conversation. Let's talk about Brendan Todd. We talked about Lebiota with his good approach play. Brendan Todd, not there. Statistically, it ain't great. Todd ranks outside the top 100 in both off the tee and approach play, 89th in birdies or better gained. But his putting is so good that it's kind of working. Todd does have 2 missed cuts the past couple of months, but they both came in majors. Between then, he had an 8th at the Charles Schwab. Todd ranks 17th in the field in Data Golf's true strokes gained over the past 6 months. He is between Siwoo Kim, who I like, and Jason Day and Gary Woodland. So that specific piece of data says we should be on Brendan Todd, but it's so hard for me to talk myself into him in a guy who is so different than the type of golfer we typically target. So even with him performing well, I can't talk myself into it. I put a lot of faith in the Data Golf true strokes gained rankings. Those say that Todd is interesting. I can't pull the trigger. Where are you at of Brendan Todd this week?
I haven't gotten there. He's all short game with and you want the ball striking to be neutral at best. That's kind of, usually it's the inverse for us where we're saying that we know the ball striking is going to be there. We want the putting to be neutral. For him, it's the opposite. 76 percentile, though, in birdie or better rate gained. Really good on bent grass and POA, 96 percentile there over the past 100 rounds. But I mentioned opportunities gained at the top of the show, which is Fantasy National Stat, which is effectively birdie opportunities. So he's 76 percentile in birdie or better rate gained, but 18th percentile in opportunities gained. So he's really going to be dependent on that putter. And while I'm emphasizing putting this week, it's not the only piece of the puzzle. So I'm probably not in on Todd, especially at that mid 9,000 salary. That's a little bit high for me.
I agree. So interesting finishes, interesting ranking, the Data Golf true strokes gain stuff, but not quite there for this week on Brendan Todd.
Before we move on, he's not in the field yet, but Mito Pereira has won back-to-back on the Korn Ferry Tour. He's not in the field, so I don't know what his salary would be. But Data Golf has him 12th over the past 20 rounds in their adjusted strokes gain. So if he's a value, he's also someone I would consider, but I couldn't talk him up.
Mito is a great name. So I find that very interesting. If you look at the past 6 months, there's not a lot there. So what do you tell me what you know about this guy?
Not a whole lot. It's just a matter of the fact, he's coming in win 10th, 66th, 9th, 2nd on the Korn Ferry Tour. I talk about the Korn Ferry Tour often enough relative to the European Tour. It's about the same in terms of difficulty. Korn Ferry Tour never gets quite as good as the European Tour, but it's really not that different. So just imagine someone's coming over with, consecutive wins, bunch of top 10s before that, and he's in the mid or low 8,000s. That's relevant enough. So I just wanted to throw him out there. I don't know what the salary is going to end up being though.
Okay, perfect. Keep an eye on Mito Pereira once he is added to the field. Let's take a look at what bookmakers are saying for this week. Bryson DeChambeau, the heavy favorite. He is 7-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Then it dips down to 14-1, which is where we find Patrick Reed, Hideki Matsuyama, and Webb Simpson are both 16-1. Will Zalatoris is 20-1, followed by Joaquin Neiman at 22-1. Jason Kokrak and Matthew Wolf are both 27-1. Jason Day, Kevin Kisner, and Sung J Im round at the top group. They are all 33-1. So Brandon, after Bryson, the odds are pretty flat. Even there's not a huge drop off from Webb to Neiman and all those guys. So how does it alter your thoughts on roster construction for this week? Are we still trying to jam in 2 guys that Neiman are higher? Is there any interest in that high 10,000 range? What are your overall thoughts on that range for this week?
So I think there's some interesting names in the 10,000 range. I'll just start there. Specifically, Cameron Tringali. He's got 2 good finishes at this course. I think he's actually one of my player picks for this week, just based on, Jim and I have a lot of overlap with player picks, so I bumped down a little bit. No, but I mean, he's the one who really stands out. I'm not necessarily there. There's so many big names right around him with Jason Day, Bubba Watson, Ricky Fowler. Probably not going to get to any of them. Specifically Jason Day, who's coming off a really good finish with 6.9 strokes gained from short game, which I'm not going to chase there. He's not a particularly good birdie maker, but I think Tringali is really interesting overall. But, other than that, I don't see enough in the 10,000 range, maybe Charlie Hoffman now, to build around. So I am going to be looking at, 2, possibly, I don't ever build lineups like this, so I don't even know how viable something like this is. But if I would go Bryson, Webb, Neiman, 8,300 left for 3 golfers. I never play lineups like that, but that is something I would consider this week, especially with some golfers right around there. Lee Biota's 8,200. Sebastian Munoz, I think, is 82 as well. Some guys in the 7,000 range. I'm open to that. So 2 at least out of, from Neiman and above, or I should probably say Tringali and above. But yeah, it's a little bit different for me this week. What about you?
I think I'm with you on the Neiman part. I like Tringali, and I could see myself dropping down him for the second guy, but I do feel like there's a drop off after Neiman where I'd rather just find the way to get to Neiman as a second guy. As a third guy with the super top heavy one you mentioned, maybe I could see going Bryson, Neiman, Tringali. Maybe that could work. I've kind of got that in front of me right now, and I don't hate it. There aren't any golfers I'm actively against in that build, but it makes me a little uncomfy, as the kids would say.
Yeah, but I do think that the low 9,000 range doesn't have a ton of names that I'm super interested in.
You're right.
The upper 8,000 and then even the mid 8,000 or some names I've been playing a lot of, which is not to say I'm sticking with these guys no matter what. I've seen a lot from them, and if I saw something in them 2 weeks ago. Odds are that's still relevant because I look at a long enough sample. So I'm just kind of seeing enough names there. Ben On is 8,200. We know that he can, if he ever gets back to form, can make some birdies. But I'll just clarify, I guess. If I'm playing Tringali, I'm going to have 2 golfers above him in salary. He's not going to be my second golfer.
Yep.
That's too balanced.
I think so too. Speaking of Ben On, which golfers' odds have shifted since things opened up yesterday at FanDuel Sportsbook?
Hey man, that's a nice segue.
Pro man, I'm a pro.
Good stuff. Joaquin Neiman, 27-22 on FanDuel Sportsbook. Maverick McNeely, 65-55. Matt Jones, 100-80. Doug Gim, 120-80. Bo Hostler, Cam Davis, 120-90. And Byung-Hun An, 270-120.
I like both Doug Gim and Cameron Davis a lot, so I find that encouraging. Those are the 2 guys I mentioned before as being in the mid 8,000 range, who I like a lot. So seeing their odds shift, it doesn't it's confirmation bias, but that's fine. I don't care personally. Fine with it. I'm bored. Which lower salary golfers have odds stand out to you?
McNeely is 9,100. He's now 55-1. Brendan Todd, 60-1. Alex Noren, Steph Straka, Danny Willett, 65-1. Harold Varner, the third. Not
kudos to Harold Varner if he's in the field.
Lonzo Griffin, Chris Kirk, Ryan Armour, Matt Jones, Doug Gim, all 80-1. At varying salaries. So we do have those sprinkles of golfers whose, odds are a lot better in that, 8,000 range. And Kramer Hickok, Cam Davis, Bo Hostler, 90-1.
So Maverick McNeely is someone who both has low odds for his salary and has shifted since things opened, 65-55. He is $9,100. McNeely can make birdies, finished 8th year last year, finished 30th last week at the Travelers. But the approach play is pretty big question mark. So are you in on Maverick McNeely, or does the approach play prevent you from getting too excited?
Yeah, I'm not quite there. I'm really surprised to see the odds be where they are for him. I don't really understand it so much. I guess it's back-to-back top 30s, but
and an 8th last year. Don't forget that. People love course history.
Sure. I just have him in the 10th percentile in approach, and that's really hard to get around. I mean, I guess, so here's another situation. 87th percentile in birdie or better rate gained, but 23rd percentile in opportunities gained. So he's probably a bit out over his skis with that, birdie conversion.
Hater. Yeah. Let's talk about weather for this week in Detroit. Thursday could be kind of interesting. Wind speeds start out around 5 miles per hour. They wind up closer to 10 miles per hour by the end of the day. There also could be some rain in the afternoon. Friday, wind speeds are pretty steady throughout the day. They do increase a bit to around 13 miles per hour in the afternoon. Winds are close to 10 miles per hour Saturday before they go down a bit for Sunday. So there could be some funky weather on Thursday specifically. I don't think there is like a definitive wave advantage as of right now, outside of maybe a slight bump up for those teeing off earlier Thursday. What I would say, though, is because there is some funkiness in the forecast, I'd check back Wednesday night to see what the up-to-date forecast looks like. As of now, no takeaways, but that could change because there is some rain and wind potentially there, so check back on that Wednesday night. Let's finish up here with our player picks for this week at the Rocket Mortgage Classic based on the salaries over at FanDuel.com. Brandon, who are you targeting in the upper tier on FanDuel for this week?
I'm just going to stick with Bryson, which is not a surprise, but I do think he's the best process-based play. I think he's the best cash game play, and I think he's very much in play for tournaments, even though he will be chalky. I think you just differentiate elsewhere, and it also doesn't really feel like a week where he's going to be 40%. He might be, and if he is, then I need to scale back a little bit. But, just the best long-term adjusted golfer in this field, according to my database. Field leader in adjusted strokes gained off the tee and overall birdie or better rate gained over the past 100 rounds. So, I think that we just differentiate elsewhere. I think he's a really high floor play for this week. It's going to be a course that's not as demanding on his frontal lobe or whatever he had. So I think he's just going to be able to pound driver, hit some short irons or wedges onto these greens and then putt well. So, if it were more reflective, and again, this is where I kind of have trouble sometimes, my win simulations don't have him as likely to win as the 7-1 odds imply, but he's not like 13,000 to sort of reflect the betting market. So I think it's not enough of a salary difference for me to kind of be low on Bryson.
This is a Kyle Larson situation where your best route to getting financial exposure to them is via DFS because it's not as restricting there as it is in betting. So I like Bryson as well. My favorite high salary golfer outside of Bryson is Webb Simpson. He's number 2 among the studs for me. Distance not as necessary this week, which opens the door for Webb to perk up. I like him a lot here at 11-7. Even with the lack of distance, Webb does still rank 16th in birdies or better gained the past 50 rounds. A big part of that is putting. He ranks 7th in bentgrass plus POA putting the past 100 rounds. The last time we saw Webb, he did miss the cut, but that was at the US Open where distance was important, and that's not as big of an issue for this week. So the long-term form is elite. He benefits from the layout of the course. I think that Webb is great for both cash games and for tournaments. I just filled out a temporary bobble hat lineup. It does not have Webb in it. So I did wind up going Bryson, but I am still considering starting things off with Bryson and being a bit more balanced there. But given the value plays that I like, I think that this actually does wind up working out. So Webb still for tournaments, but I'm softening on the Webb and cash stance from earlier.
Yeah, I think that the salary difference between Bryson and Webb is just not enough to kind of not get to Bryson in cash games. So that's where I am. But Webb is someone I love as well. I much prefer Webb as a bet at 16-1. Again, my win simulations see it pretty close between the two. And overall, like, he's just going to be my second favorite process-based golfer. I know he's had the neck injury, but we've seen him play since then and finish well. He missed the cut at the US Open, but lost strokes putting, which is weird for him. So I'm in on Webb. I think he's the second place I would go on FanDuel this week.
Okay, who else do you like in this upper tier?
Well, your second love would have been here for me, so I'll bump down to Cameron Tringali. And I think I've settled on my 5 with Bryson, Reed, Webb, Tringali, and Joaquin Neiman, who you'll talk about. And then I think I'm just going to play those guys and then probably bump down as far as I need to and just play some value plays. But Tringali, we've seen 2 strong finishes from him at Detroit Golf Club already with a 30th and a 5th. So he has that angle. He's in the 89th percentile in adjusted tee to green over the past year, 92nd in adjusted putting, 97th in birdie or better rate gained. The only other 4 golfers who meet those cutoffs are Bryson, Reed, Webb, and Jason Kokrak. They all have a higher salary than Tringali has. So he's my favorite tier 2 play. And honestly, other than maybe Charlie Hoffman, I'm not going to have anyone else in the 10,000 range.
Yeah, I think that Tringali and Hoffman are the 2 guys there I'd agree with as well. My second high salary guy is Joaquin Neiman, who you alluded to before. Neiman, someone who can be accurate when he needs to be. Like his overall fairways gain number is not great, 109th there, but he's 38th in good drives gained. And I think that ability to be malleable is good for Neiman this week. He ranks 6th in total strokes gained off the tee, so I like him a lot at 11-2. Neiman is also 14th in approach. He is 14th in birdies or better gained. He has not finished inside the top 20 since the Wells Fargo, but in there were 2 majors. He still gained strokes in approach in all but 1 event in that time. And Neiman actually even gained 2 strokes around the green in one of those while keeping his improved skills on the green. I'm not saying bank on it. Do not bank on it. Absolutely not. But hey, it doesn't hurt. I think that we just need to see Neiman put it all together. Put together the off the tee play, keep the approach good, keep the putting okay, not tank himself around the greens. I like him a lot at 11-2. What are your thoughts on Neiman this week?
Yeah, I had to tip my cap to him, which I actually wasn't wearing for once. So I put one on to...
Yeah, what was going on there? The hair looks good today. I'm not going to lie, but I was confused why there was no hat.
Yeah, I think I just, didn't really feel... None of the hats kind of fit. I'm wearing a white shirt, which I don't really wear, so it's kind of weird to find the right hat. But that's kind of where that went. But okay. Yeah, I thought the hair was decent for once. It usually looks like I just rolled out of bed because I just roll out of bed and don't fix my hair. But yeah, for Neiman, for me, it's that he is not good chipping. And that's the one thing that you can not have this week. So kind of gets a natural boost, and this salary does help. But the more I looked at things, like the more I realized I don't necessarily need to save a bunch of salary. I still think Neiman is a great win bet. He's going to be in my core for those studs. But for me, it's really that we know he can just like laser it to the green and maybe make some putts. And I don't think he'll need to chip. And if he does need to chip, he's not going to be in contention anyway.
But hey, he can gain 2 around the green anyway. So we're all good. He can. Not saying he will, but he can. He proved it. We're good. No more concerns with Joaquin Neiman with the chipping.
Yeah.
Let's move down to the mid-range and get off of that and talk about Brandon, a key narrative for this week. I slacked this to you last week after we recorded, and I was like, oh man, we missed the Siwoo Kim birthday narrative. However, technically his birthday is this week. It was yesterday. So I believe statute of limitations on birthday narratives is like either way, 1 week, one way or another. Siwoo Kim missing the cut last week so he could party, and now he's rested up. So the birthday narrative says Siwoo Kim guaranteed to win this week. What do you like about him at $9,700?
Yeah, I like a lot for Kim, honestly.
Mainly the birthday narrative, I assume.
Yeah, so I'm just going to... It's his birthday, so let's move on. But I have him in the 95th percentile in adjusted strokes gained tee to green over the past year. He's played here twice with just like sort of okay data, which is not really what you want to see, but I'm not putting a whole lot of stock into 2 starts at any particular course, especially with a bunch of data in between those that says that he's really good play. So I'm not going to overlook that. We see him do well on easy courses generally. Fantasy National has him ranked 11th in strokes gained average on easy courses over the past 100 rounds. And honestly, Kim benefits a ton getting away from Bermuda greens. He is in the 70th percentile in combined bent grass and POA putting over the past 100 rounds, and just overall 91st percentile in birdie or better rate gain. So I like him as a bet at 50-1 outright, but he's kind of the one mid-range play who I really am eyeing up for this week.
He is currently in that aforementioned bobble hat lineup. I like him a lot. I think that he's solid for this week. I was on him last week and I torpedoed him. So sorry, Siwoo Kim. But we're back here once again for this week. The other guy we discussed last week and obviously jinxed was Emiliano Grillo. Didn't work out. He missed the cut as well. I didn't wind up using him, so that was good. But I like him for this week here at $9,900. Grillo missed the cut. He has 2 straight missed cuts now. He lost a combined 3.9 strokes on the green between those two. But the big reassuring thing for me is that the driver bounced back for Grillo. He gained 2.3 last week after having lost in each of the previous 4 events. So Grillo ranks 14th off the tee, 4th in approach, 4th in birdies or better gain the past 50 rounds, despite the bad putting. There is bent grass on the greens, which is the best thing that Grillo could possibly hear. There is some POA, which is not as good. But the hope is that people jump off Grillo due to the 2 missed cuts. But I think he's a good play here regardless at $9,900. Brandon, you brought up Grillo last week. What are your thoughts on him this week?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something I just kind of talked about where, you see something in someone and things align and then it doesn't work out for 1 week. It doesn't mean that you forget all that. For me, the only thing that I'm seeing that is really worrying me about Grillo is just the putting, specifically on this type of surface. We know that we can play Grillo on bent grass. That's about it. So, that's kind of why I kind of just wrote him off because of the POA that we do see here. But we know the irons are going to be there, and we know that the upside is high. He's got 3 top 10s since the end, since like mid March. So like he's either going to finish probably 15th or miss the cut. And that's not necessarily the type of volatility you have to embrace this week. So I'm a little bit lower on Grillo for that reason.
And I would say that I mentioned Siwoo Kim is in the bobble hat lineup. Grillo is not. Grillo is a tournament play. I think Siwoo Kim, given his splits on these surfaces specifically, I do think the safety is there, although it was the same surfaces last week. But I think that Siwoo Kim, safe enough for a cash game. Grillo, not. Who else do you like here in the mid-range on FanDuel, if anyone?
I always love Lanto Griffin, so I can make a case for him at 9,300. 93rd percentile approach play over the past year. I had a 21st at Detroit Golf Club, last year as well. Struggles around the green a bit, just kind of middling there at 44th percentile. But that's kind of common for what I'm really looking at for these non-elite players for the week. Looking at golfers whose salaries, win odds are probably low because everything's factored in. And whenever they do struggle around the green, that's factored into their strokes gain total, their results, their betting odds. And then if you say that that's not important, they get naturally boosted up a little bit. So that's kind of the main angle for me with Griffin, is that we know he can score well. And if the chipping is, if he can have baseline chipping and do everything else, he's going to be a fine play. But I'm just not really going to be in this salary tier a whole lot because I'm just not going to be.
And I think that kind of goes back to what you were talking about before with like getting 3 studs, because if you have 3 guys in the 8,000 range, it's not as big of a detriment as it usually would be. One guy I like here, who I think we disagreed on last week, which was good for you, is Chris Kirk. I like Chris Kirk at 92. He missed the cut last week. Just love a lot of missed cut guys apparently this week. It wasn't an implosion. He gained a 0.1 tee to green, just lost 2 putting to hurt him. The approach rebound for Kirk there was nice. He hadn't gained prior to that since the RBC Heritage. The problem is that the off the tee play fell off, which erased the gains in approach. Kirk has been positive in both recently. He just hasn't done both in the same event, but Kirk can do that. He ranks 17th in birdies or better gain the past 50 rounds. He is 37th off the tee, 33rd in approach, and I feel like there is enough here to like Kirk at 92. With that said, I'd like to not be in this range for the most part. I will use Kirk if I am here and I don't want to renegotiate elsewhere. Like Chris Kirk plus Webb versus Bryson and Cam Davis, I'll take Bryson every time there. If we're doing that 2v2, give me Bryson every time. But I do think that Chris Kirk 82 or at 92 is someone I'm considering and willing to use if I'm stuck in this tier. Brandon, any thoughts for you on Chris Kirk?
He's an other to consider for me, specifically in the 9,000 range, just because it's hard to find 5 golfers in that tier. Not the best putter, but solid elsewhere. can make birdies. Like it's fine, but I'm not really excited to roster Chris Kirk or build around him this week.
Excited is not the word I would use either, so we're good to go there. Let's move down to the value range, which is pretty good. So who do you like in the value tier for this week?
I'll stick with Steph Straka. Just kind of reiterate what I like about him. I already talked about him in more detail, but 10th last week when he gained 5.4 strokes from approach play, 58th percentile in adjusted approach over the past year, which helps account for the irons being mostly cold lately. He's going to get extra buzz. We already see that on FanShare with those two top 11 finishes, but 84th percentile birdie maker. I'm not saying I'm going to lock him in as like the number one value play. That would probably be your guy next on the list, but I think there's still a case to be made, even though he's going to be a little bit chalky.
That guy's Cameron Davis. He feels super undersalaried at $8,700, so I think that he is tremendous for this week and a lock for my bobble hat cash game lineup. He ranks 8th in birdies or better gained, 10th off the tee, and 23rd in approach. He is hideous around the greens, and the hope is, like you've discussed before, that matters less this week, and he can do enough elsewhere to erase that. Davis has shown upside in the not terribly distant past. He finished 3rd at the American Express in January, 14th at the AT&T Pro-Am, and in both those events, he was fine around the greens. It's a situation where if he can just not implode, which seems potentially possible this week, if he can just tread water, a top 10 is within his range of outcomes. So I like Cameron Davis a lot this week. Brandon, what puts you on him?
Just the fact that, I don't care about around the green play, and we know that at his best, he can just fire some lasers, some darts, and maybe make some putts. And he's just a really good birdie maker, as you talked about. And that's really what gets me there. And I mentioned already that I like combine long-term form and stats for the week that I'm looking at. And I have Davis, despite being 47th in salary or tied for 46th, I should probably say. I have him ranked 18th overall in this field.
And I think that's enticing for sure. So Cameron Davis, to me, a building block at 87. Who else do you like here in the value range?
I'm going to go with Tom Hoge, jump the whole way down to 7,600. Just better than the salary suggests. It's not to say that he's a slam dunk or can't miss play, but not long off the tee, but that kind of gets mitigated a little bit this week. You can be long off the tee, as we saw last year, but you don't have to be. So that's, again, leads to volatility, leads to more golfers being relevant. 73rd percentile in birdie or better rate gained, despite that, lack of length, which is not the most common overlap there. 84th percentile in long-term adjusted strokes gained approach, which is what we always like. But, the salary really opens things up for Hoge. I like James Hahn as well. I think he's 7,700. So I could even probably get talked into Vaughn Taylor at 7,600 as well. I actually built a lineup with, I'll say it's a bit too much to give out, but I'll say I had Siwoo and some studs. And
what do you mean Siwoo and studs? That implies Siwoo is not a stud himself. How dare you?
The salary-based studs. That's the thing. Siwoo's probably under salary too, but
yeah,
you can make it work if you can talk yourself into Tom Hoge and maybe someone else around there.
I probably will not use Tom Hoge. However, the big counterpoint to that is that he does rank above Kramer Hickok, Redmond, Steph Straka, all guys we discussed in the true strokes gain data over the past 6 months. So Hoge, that's a good defense for using him. I might not get there, but that is enough for him to be fully in play for this week. My second low salary guy is another guy who I will be using in our head-to-head is Doug Gim. He is our guy. I think we can say that now. Is that fair? Can we just make Doug Gim a heat check favorite at this point?
Yeah, he's got the stamp of approval from us.
Okay, Doug Gim, confirmed. Heat check stud. $8,500. That is despite ranking 7th in approach the past 50 rounds. That hasn't translated to a ton of birdies, but some of that's because he's not long off the tee. He ranks 85th in the field in distance, but 14th in good drives gained. And I'm hoping that a course where accuracy matters a bit more than usual can elevate Gim for a value salary. $8,500, totally fair for me. I love Doug Gim. What are your thoughts on our boy this week?
Yeah, I like him as well. He would be someone who, just another reason why we can get up to Bryson, build around these studs. And I think the question you have to ask is this guy heat check approved? Ask me, is he above the 90th percentile in adjusted tee to green and below the 20th percentile in putting? And if that's the case, then yeah.
So I was doing a search for Cameron Davis for some reason, and it said Google does like related to. The related list for Cameron. I've apparently searched I searched Siwoo Kim to see his birthday. The related list is Cameron Davis, Sung J M, Joaquin Neiman, Taylor Gooch, Doc Redmond, Emiliano Grillo, Cameron Tringali. It's just like, is it just because I've searched for these two guys and all these guys together, or is this just does Google know me that well that they know? Actually, I'm using a Google Doc right at the rundown, so they probably actually do know. This is okay. I figured this out. It's not a conspiracy.
Let's stop talking about Google and. They're not tracking any.
Yeah, no free ads. Come on. No free ads for Google. They need the publicity from us. No free ads.
I use and I rip off the front of my notebook so I don't know who sold me that, and then I write everything down there. That's how I do stuff.
Tinfoil over the notebook too, just to be safe. Okay, good. Win picks for this week.
Let me open up my Google Doc.
So I'm going to pick Patrick Reed or Webb Simpson. I'm deciding which one. Do you want one of them or no?
Well, yeah, I won the ball hat last week, and I'm just going to take Webb. Not that we can still overlap.
You can take Webb. I'll take Reed then.
He's what, 14?
Mm-hmm. Webb is 16.
Webb 16.
Second golfer. Honestly, it's Neiman. He's shortened. 22 is not as good of a number as 27 was, and that makes me hesitate a bit. Like, I could consider Kokrak. Actually, let's go Kokrak. Kokrak has stayed at 27. Neiman is shortened to 22. Oh, no, that's stupid.
You haven't talked about Jason Kokrak for 1 second on this podcast.
Yeah, but like, it's because isn't he higher salary than Neiman? Yeah, he's $100 higher. I'm
going Siwoo Kim at 50.
Okay. Well, I'll go Neiman then. 22 is not the best number, but I still like him. So let's go with I have Reed and Neiman.
Wait, let me go with Will Zalatoris. I've been talking him up all show.
It's a different thing.
It is, but
they're different things. We talked about Bryson. You would never bet Bryson at 7-1, but like we talked about all the time.
I don't think it's even that indefensible.
Get out of here! Get out of here! Shoot! No, terrible. I'm changing to Kokrak out of defiance. I'm making you change your doc. Kokrak at 27, guaranteed to beat Joaquin Neiman this week. Write it down.
It's written down in the Google spreadsheet here.
So Jason Kokrak will pop up in my next search for. Lucas Cola.
Oh, I thought you were doing a brand based.
No,
I was going to branch out.
No, because it's all the heat check guys just all together. Okay, so you have Webb and
Siwoo Kim
for the birthday narrative, not for anything else, and I have Reed and Kokrak for this week. That is all that we have here for the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast for this week. But as mentioned, we are back here once again later today. Brandon is with you 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages, taking your questions live on air, both about betting and DFS for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. So make sure you subscribe there. Also, subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed to get your MLB, UFC, NASCAR, and PGA podcasts all in one place. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I'm at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you this week with the Rocket Mortgage Classic. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.